This is the multiple award-winning GardenDC podcast, the podcast about everything gardening in the Mid-Atlantic region and beyond. I'm your host, Kathy Jentz. I'm the editor of Washington Gardener magazine. Our content is aimed at gardening enthusiasts, people who grow everything, from edibles to ornamentals, natives to exotics. If it grows in our area, that's what we talk about. Welcome to episode 275 of the GardenDC podcast. In this episode, we talk with illustrator and author Halsey Berryman all about her new book, Pests and Other Friends. The plant profile is on wallflowers, and we share what's going on in the garden, as well as some upcoming local gardening events in the What's New segment. We close out with the last word on growing kale in pots from Christy Page of Green Prints. What's my personal favorite garden pest? Be sure to listen to the end of the episode to learn about that. This episode, we're joined by Halsey Berryman. She is the illustrator and author of Pests and Other Friends. Discover the true nature of the most maligned animals. Welcome, Halsey.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you on, and we're going to get all into those good, bad, and maybe neutral garden creatures, right?
Right.
But before we get into all of those, let's talk a little bit about Halsey and wind it all the way back to baby Halsey. And I'm going to ask if you were born with a green thumb and chlorophyll in your veins.
Unfortunately, I was not. I acquired a medium green thumb late into adulthood. I became kind of obsessed with houseplants, and I have a bunch of them, probably maybe 50 or 60 of them that are in varying degrees, the varying states of living. When I get really busy, sometimes I regretfully neglect them, but I have not successfully planted anything and grown it from seed quite yet, although my mother has a famous green thumb and had a whole garden with corn and tomatoes and potatoes and all kinds of things that she tilled herself and put the fence posts up herself and all that stuff. So maybe one day.
And where does your mother live, and where is that garden?
Oh, this garden was outside of Baltimore, where I spent the first half of my childhood. I'm originally from Washington, D.C., but then I lived outside of Baltimore in Baltimore County, where my mom grew that garden. So, yeah, not here anymore, but it was a great beauty at one time.
Nice. And so you grew up basically in the Baltimore, D.C. region, and then you went on to Bachelor of Fine Arts at the Corcoran Gallery, or Corcoran College of Art, sorry, not the gallery. And you're an illustrator and lettering artist. What brought you to writing and producing this book on garden creatures?
Well, I've always had sort of an affinity for animals from the first place, and it's such a coincidence that DK is the one publishing this book, because as a child I would often draw from reference images in DK eyewitness discovery books from the early and mid 90s, and I just really loved, I don't know, the underdog. I love the underdog story. I think I started drawing pigeons at first in around 2021. I actually lived in Wichita, Kansas for 2 years over COVID, because my wife used to be a professor of anthropology, and she taught at Wichita State University. And we were there, and I would walk my dog every day, and I saw a pigeon on the ground who was deceased, and someone had shoved a cigarette butt in his mouth. And that image, I was already really depressed living in a place where I didn't know anyone during COVID, and it was kind of just me, my wife, and all my animals, and not making a ton of new friends because it was COVID. And that this image was a flashbulb image in my memory, and I started sort of obsessing over pigeons and raccoons and animals of that nature. So then I made a calendar of that's actually called Pests and Other Friends as well in 2023, that had 12 animals that are considered pests, and kind of like the basic ones like pigeons, raccoons, rats, snakes, garter snakes, squirrels, etc. So then the book came about in summer of 2024 when my now editor reached out to me asking me if I ever had an idea to write a book, and I submitted that calendar as kind of a starting point. So that's how it all came together, and I'm very fortunate to have been able to work on a book about animals that most people have a negative relationship with.
Yeah, and I think we're going to go into some of those animals. Some people would consider them nuisance animals in their gardens. Some of them are gardening friends, of course, and have beneficial qualities, but they're almost all very familiar to anybody in a suburban or urban garden environment, especially here in the Mid-Atlantic.
Right.
And Halsey, you don't live too far from me.
I don't.
On the other side of the Tacoma Park area. So if anybody is familiar with Washington, D.C., we're kind of that tip of that diamond. And I would say that you see a lot of the same creatures that I do every day.
Right.
And I was going to ask about you said you're an animal lover, and of course you have your house plants. How about the mix of, you have a couple dogs and 3 cats, having those with your house plants? Because even our own domestic pets can sometimes be pests indoors for those plants.
I am very lucky that my cats don't really go after my plants. They used to, and I have a little sunroom in my house right now where the plants are kind of quarantined by a dog gate, and they're just not as interested in them as they were when I was living in an apartment in DC and I only had 1 cat back then. So I've sort of just rigged up my house so that they live peacefully and separately.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to do things, not just in the outside garden to fence away what you don't want the creatures to access, but also inside is to create some barriers, some fencing, so to speak. I use glass terrariums for some of my more interested kitties, say in an orchid that is bouncing in the breeze. They would tear that, literally apart. So those are the barriers that I use as well.
Right. And my mom has a spider plant that she sacrificed to her cats because they're not toxic to cats, and hoping that will appease them, and it just doesn't. So my strategy is different.
Yeah, I think there's a theory, Halsey, called trap crops. Have you ever heard of that?
I haven't.
So a farmer will plant a trap crop on the edge of a field, say. So it's a cornfield, but he doesn't want the deer to eat the corn, so he'll put something more enticing somewhere else. And so maybe the crows, the deer, or whatever the issue is, will go for the trap crop. So I think of that theory as well when I grow cat grass inside for my kitties. And I think that's what your mom was doing as well with the spider plant, is that was a trap crop, try to distract you from the other plants with this hopefully better, more enticing plant. And so a lot of the pests and other friends in your book, I think, are beautifully illustrated.
Thank you.
And your style, I'm going to describe it for the listeners who can't see the book in front of them, kind of graphic novel style, right? And kind of, I want to say Ranger Rick.
That's such a great reference. I love that. Yeah. I really admire vintage scientific illustrations, but something that has a little bit more forgiveness, because these aren't meant to be like exactly anatomically correct, scientifically accurate drawings. They're mostly meant to capture the spirit of the animal. And I use a lot of really quick mark making and sort of grainy digital brushes to convey that quality. So I really appreciate the reference to Ranger Rick, because that was another one of my go-tos, as well as zoo books, if anybody is old enough to remember those also.
I think I still see those in the library.
That's great.
I think I still see kids perusing those because it's always fun to see a stack of those out on a table. So let's dive into some of those garden pests, and maybe not so pests. We're going to call them pals.
Okay.
Is that a good name?
Fair enough. Yeah.
And we're going to start with opossums, or as we call them here, possums. And that is one that I personally adore because...
Me too.
Halsey, they eat the ticks.
Right.
Number one. If they didn't do anything else in the world, that's number one right there. But they also eat slugs and grubs and other things that prey on your plants. And they are the cutest, and people are scared of them.
I
So
think
why do you
they're
think
so
they're so
cute
scared
too.
of them?
Well, they have 50 teeth, and that might
Mm,
be a contributor. That's more teeth than any other North American mammal. And they tend to show them a lot when they're scared. So they look really scary when they're scared. And they
mm-hmm.
hiss, and then their heart rate slows down, and they do that thing that everyone calls like playing possum, or they play dead to ward off predators, including us. So I don't know. I think their fleshy pink tail is scary to people because it reminds them of
Yeah.
rats.
Mm-hmm.
But I personally find them so cute, and I think it's so sad that they only live like 2 or 3 years. So I think we should give them the time on the planet that they have in peace.
I didn't realize they were so short-lived. That's
Yeah.
sad to know. But you're right. I think it is the tail, the rat-like tail,
Mhm.
hairless tail. I think if it was a fluffy, cute tail, like a squirrel,
Yeah.
they would be more beloved.
Yeah. And their eyes are so like reflective in
Hmm.
the night too. And I mean, that's the case with so many of the animals that I talk about in the book, but I think possums especially.
Yeah. They're misunderstood, but they're cuties. That's what
I
we're going to
agree.
say. So encourage more possums in your garden. They're going to help you out.
Right. People also think they have rabies too for some
Mm.
reason, and it's this
Hmm.
weird myth because it's actually their low body temperature makes it so they can't contract rabies.
Yeah, I
So
feel like
it's
that
confusing.
it was a 70s or 80s like urban myth,
Hmm.
kind of, went along the same time period as quicksand and other
Right.
things that people were
Satanic
scared
panic,
of. Yes, that people were scared
possum
of.
panic.
And maybe there was one possum that had rabies or got confused with a
Mm,
giant rat or other type of creature. But yeah, there's this weird misperception. So it's great to point out that you're
right.
not going to get rabies from
No.
an adjacent possum. So next are raccoons, and some people call them trash pandas.
Yeah.
And pandas are cute, and so
Objective
are
fact.
raccoons. Yes. And they have that bandit mask. They have cute little paws. They're very intelligent,
Very.
and they do some mischief. They can be garden beneficials, but they can also be little jerks. So let's talk about.
Yeah, I don't really see the problem with raccoons personally, but maybe it's just because of my neighborhood or my lack of a garden. But I just think they're so funny.
Hmm.
In my book, I have in the background, it's a very small portion of the illustration, but they're breaking into a car, which obviously they can't do. But I just think they're hilarious. And they have these little paws, and they wash their food before they eat it, and I don't know. I just think I know they break into stuff and they eat trash, and they people get upset that they break into their trash cans and all that stuff. But I guess I just have a wide bandwidth for the chaos because I don't
Hmm.
know. Humans are just as bad, if not worse. So, and I tolerate people being annoying all the time. So why not
Yeah.
extend that to the little guys down the street?
Yeah, it would kind of be like a 3-year-old or a toddler.
Right.
If you let them loose in the wild, you'd have a similar outcome. Raccoons can be a bit of a problem if you have a water garden. They love to poach your fish. They love to upend things and destroy things. That way, if you keep chickens, raccoons are going to be a real problem for you
I'm
because they
sure.
love
Yeah.
to steal those eggs. But exclusionary fencing, putting some wire around, and having some other barriers around your water garden should keep the raccoons out.
Right. And they also eat a lot of carrion or dead animals, and they help prevent the spread of disease too. So, I mean, it might be worth keeping them around anyway,
Hmm.
even if they do mess up your garden a little bit. I think there's so many culprits that you can't just blame the raccoons anyway.
Yes. Yeah, they do a good job with cleanup.
Yeah.
So, next on kind of related, the skunks. And skunks are similar to possums. They eat grubs, slugs, beetles, small creatures that are attacking your plants. But why some gardeners are unhappy with skunks is they will dig up your lawn to get those grubs.
Right.
But guess what? You have an unhealthy lawn if you have enough grubs for to attract a skunk. So they're actually doing you a favor by eating those grubs.
Right. And they also like nightshades too, which is ironic because like as a tomato is a nightshade, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people often bathe in tomato juice after being sprayed by a skunk, which also doesn't work. So I just think the connection is kind of funny that we associate tomatoes as like an aid to skunks when really they attract them
Yep.
in some cases. So
Yeah, and I think skunks are one of those mammals that they're usually passing by.
right,
They're not trying to have much contact with you. They don't love humans. So if you see one, you turn away, they'll turn away.
right.
It's kind of like keep in your own lane, and you're not going to usually have a problem with a skunk. So next are squirrels, and these can be real jerks on the
Yeah.
level of the raccoon, but not quite, because they will dig up your planters, they'll eat your bulbs, and sometimes they're just doing mischief because they want to put their food, like their acorns, in places. I always call it squirrelscaping, Halsey.
Yeah.
Like, you get some of your bulbs moved from one spot to another spot. The next spring, you're like, I didn't plant them there, but the squirrels did that.
That
So
might
that's,
explain the mysterious
yeah,
tulips in my backyard that are not mine.
yes, definitely. And sometimes you'll have an oak tree pop up
Hmm.
in a container that you're like, I know I did not plant that oak tree there. So tell us a little bit more about squirrels.
I just think squirrels are like so many of the animals of the book. I'm probably going to say this over and over again. I just think they're hilarious. And they're also a lot smarter than we think.
Hmm.
They remember and they can recall where they buried seeds, and they sometimes do forget them. That's true, but they can, and they also plant fake burials so that they can trick other animals and be like, oh yeah, I'm totally burying a seed right now, and they're not. So that animal can come behind them and look for the loot and then discover nothing. So they're little Indiana Joneses, and they also cause a lot of power outages. That's another reason why people don't like them.
Mm-hmm.
They shut down the NASDAQ twice, which I
Oh,
think,
wow.
I mean, they're part of the proletariat, so we got to appreciate them.
Yeah, I think chewing on wires, like especially anything like rubber or that sort of
Yeah.
thing, people aren't too pleased with them, if they get inside a car engine and do some
Hmm.
damage that way. So that's not good for the squirrels.
No.
Neither is chewing on electric wires. Actually,
No, and they
yeah.
cause, I think, 50% of wildlife related power outages. So it's just, I never thought of them that way, but because, like a lot of rodents, their incisors keep growing as they age, they have to
Mm,
chew on stuff
hmm.
to keep their teeth at a normal size. I don't think they particularly like the taste of wire either. So that's another case that I talk about a lot in the book, where our the way that we've developed the land and our infrastructure really affects the animals too. So we're kind of, not giving them a great place to live either by
Hmm.
building all this stuff and confusing them and hurting them in the
Yeah.
process.
And I know a lot of people adore their squirrels,
Yeah.
and they'll put up a squirrel feeder, they'll put out extra corn and have a budget for feeding the
Yeah.
squirrels. And in DC, we have some very aggressive, I'll call them squirrels, that are in the touristy areas because they're
Hmm.
used to being fed by tourists, and have no fear of humans, because we get tourists from all over the world who don't know the eastern gray squirrel.
Hmm.
So they see ours and they're like, oh, look how cute compared to, whatever their native squirrel or other wildlife is. So they often get a little bit too rambunctious. I've had one Halsey jump into my purse and try to extract food from me. So I was like, that's a little too close, but yes.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
So, but they are smart, like you said. They are trainable.
Hmm.
So if you want to put out food for squirrels and have them, as we said with the trap crop, eat this over here, give them a water source so they stay away from your ripening tomatoes in the summertime. That's a big help to keep them from being pests in the garden. So next, kind of related, and most people think they're interchangeable,
Right.
are the chipmunks.
Well, chipmunks, I mean, again, I just think they're really cute. They remind me of sort of the classic woodland creature from an animated feature. They are really fond of flower bulbs, I hear.
Hmm.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Also,
Yep.
veggies. They just will kind of eat anything that they can find, and they've got the space for it. They can hold, I think, 12 acorns at a time in their pouches, in their cheeks. So they've got a lot of room, and they cache a lot of their food in those little burrows that you might find alongside flower beds or underneath flower beds. So I get why people are upset by that. But they also eat a lot of mushrooms too. They eat all kinds of food. They eat like some garden pests as well, invertebrates that might be eating your garden plants.
Mm-hmm.
But they eat mushrooms that release spores that can help activate the mycorrhizal network, which is sort of like a nutrient exchange highway between plants and fungi, and it helps deliver nutrients to tree roots. So they are helping in a way also.
Excellent. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't have a tremendous amount of chipmunks in our area,
Mhm.
but there are pockets of populations, and I hear some of our listeners and readers talking about big problems with chipmunks, and then other people are like, I haven't seen a chipmunk in years. So
Yeah.
it is very territorial and very specific. Most of what I hear problems with chipmunks is digging. So digging up stuff, disturbing things, which is pretty easy to, either lay down something sharp that they don't like to dig in, like the exploded slate or chicken grit, just something that's rough on their paws that they would be rather digging somewhere else.
Right.
So next are a few birds
Mhm.
that come to our gardens and our bird feeders, and that's the grackles and the starlings. I think people get those confused a lot,
They
Halsey.
do, because I think they both have a somewhat iridescent quality to them, and then they're also kind of pointy. Both of them are pretty pointy.
Hmm.
And starlings, I learned this while I was writing the book, but the origin of starlings in the US is disputed, but some people say there's a big rumor going around that in the 19th century they were introduced purposefully by somebody that was obsessed with William Shakespeare and wanted to have all the birds mentioned in Shakespeare's work
Huh.
living in the US. But it's more likely that, because it's hard to attribute an entire population of birds, especially the size of the population in the US of starlings, to one man. So it's more likely that they were introduced in big cities to combat insect populations, as
Hmm.
was the house sparrow, which is probably, if you step outside your door right now, you'll see or hear dozens of those. So it's tough to say where they came from, but they were introduced purposefully either way. The beef I have with people over starlings is that it's our fault that they're here in the first place. And yes, they cause a lot of damage, like crop damage, power outages, and that's true for grackles as well. They're kind of have the same or similar pest behaviors. But there's a lot of rumors around starlings that they outcompete native birds for food. But research actually suggests that there's no real link between native bird population decline and increasing starling populations. So I get why people are upset that an invasive species is so abundant, like starlings, but it's not their fault. And that's the case with all the invasive species that I talk about in the
Hmm.
book. And grackles are they cause a lot of power outages too because they have such huge flocks. I think it's around 3,000 birds can be up in one flock, and you'll see them flying in what are called murmurations, where if you ever drive out to the Midwest or somewhere with a really big open space, you can get a chance to see like a big cloud of blackbirds, and that's often starlings and red-winged blackbirds or other blackbirds and grackles included that can make these really really gorgeous displays of cloud-like moving formations of birds that are called murmurations.
Hmm.
So I don't know, there's some beauty to every animal, and that really gets to the thesis of my book. And starlings are, yeah, very aggressive, very abundant, but again, who's to blame? And it's
Hmm.
not them.
Yeah, they're an introduced species. They didn't invade.
Right,
they didn't come.
exactly.
They didn't come over like on boats with spears, and somebody brought them. So definitely not their fault. And if they come to your feeder and raid it, and then intimidate all the little pretty songbirds, you just have to say, "Well, I'll put out extra food over here, and
Right,
maybe get a feeder that isn't accessible to some of the larger birds."
right. Just
Hmm.
adapt. We all have
Hmm.
to adapt.
Yeah, one of the ways I've done it is to keep my suet cakes from being just taken whole by a raccoon, which he used to do. He would undo my suet cake feeder and just take the entire cake up into his nest in the tree. Is to buy a double suet cage. So it's a cage inside the cage.
Wow.
That's the only thing I've found that works, and it also allows small birds to go in and access the suet cake, but not some of those larger birds.
That's pretty hardcore.
Yeah, but again, sometimes you have to put up these barriers to have the little bit of access and preserve that sort of thing.
Right.
So speaking of big birds or bigger birds, we have the crows and ravens, and I'm a huge fan of both. So nobody can say anything bad about them around me.
No, there will be no crow and raven slander, or just generally corvid slander in my presence at all. No toleration for that. I mean, as we all know, I think everybody knows the story about how smart they are, and that's kind of their main defense. They can outperform some children in cognitive tests and puzzle solving. They also can plan for the future, which is something that people used to think only apes and humans could do. And they also, I mean, like so many animals, pass the mirror test. All these examples of intelligence are really clear in crows and ravens. And the thing that I learned most about while researching and illustrating this book was how to spot the difference, because they are very different. And it's mostly about their beak size, their general size, and the feathers on their necks and the shapes of their tails. So ravens have a wedge-shaped tail and crows have a fan-shaped tail. And then ravens are obviously much bigger and they have larger beaks, and they also have ruffled feathers around their necks, where crows are very smooth. So that they're easy to tell apart once you know a little bit more about those identifiers.
And speaking of intelligence, they're easy to train. They remember you.
Yes.
They're very...
For better or for worse.
Yes, for better or for worse. They're very face-oriented, which I think is... I don't know any other creature that, can clock you from blocks away, and he knows you were that person who lives at such and such and gave me this food.
Right.
So they know.
And they'll tell their children, and their children will tell their children, and this, as they say, murder of crows. And they live in families a lot of the time too, where the juveniles will take care of the younger ones, and they will all know about you. If you did something bad, they'll know about you. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah. And so usually they're a problem for farmers, like we talked about with the cornfield, and the classic scarecrow is out there, just something that makes movement, that looks like a human is there.
Right.
Will keep crows out of your stuff. So you might need to fence it off. You might need to throw some bird netting over. I'm not a big fan, though, of bird netting, because creatures can get caught in there.
Right.
And, any small creature can be caught in there, and you need to check it, morning and night to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So we don't want to, catch anybody that isn't the culprit.
Right.
So a lot of times with garden pests, and when I give talks about deer and other garden mammals, one animal will be blamed. That's because that's the one they saw, but that's not the one actually doing the damage.
Right.
So having a camera or watching for a while or examining the evidence helps a little bit. So let's go on to another group of flying pests, or pals, we can call them, and that's the Canada geese and mallards. So I do know, especially for our local public gardens in the region, Canada geese are a huge problem for them.
Yeah, they can be seen as aggressive, but it's important to know that they typically don't attack people unbidden. And the larger contour of the issue is that we have essentially created a paradise for them, where there's not a lot of predators, there's a lot of open fields. They're just like, golf courses are great for Canada geese.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a water source and all these things, and there's no bobcats or large predators that are going to come and eat them. So that's kind of on us, as is most of this, as listeners might be sensing a theme. While they might be, I'm not necessarily aware of their garden interactions, but as far as interacting with people in the wild, it's just a lot of people are afraid of them because they are kind of large and they are seen as territorial and aggressive. And since there are so many of them, it's easy to be a little bit reticent to go face to face with a Canada goose.
Yeah, and I think most of the problem for our large public gardens and parks is just it's the population.
Right.
Like, they'll eat anything green coming up in the spring. So sometimes you don't even get a chance to see some of those perennials or those early spring blooming ephemerals because they're ravenous and there's a huge flock of them.
Right.
So some of our local public gardens will hire like a border collie service or have dogs on property that come after hours and just scooch the Canada geese out. They just chase them and confront them and say, go to the next pond, the next open field with a water source. This isn't yours. And then other than that, they're mainly a nuisance as far as, lots and lots of goose poop,
Right.
which can be a fertilizer too.
Sure. Let's look on the bright side.
But yeah, some people, it's really the number. Like one or two Canada geese, people would treat them like swans, but it's the high intense population pressure, and they'll denude an area, of all the little green sprouting plants very quickly and easily.
Right. And they are migrating significantly less due to climate change. So we are contributing to all of this. Like all the nuisance that we're both describing is our fault in one way or another. So I think it's just best to learn to live with them and yes, mitigate them where we can or need to. Not even where we can, just where we need to, and just live and let live once again.
And the last of the flying pests that we were going to discuss is the pigeon. That you talked about a little bit before, and I'm picturing that little one passed away with the cigarette in his mouth. Pigeons do have personality.
Of course. They all do. I mean, I am of the belief that every animal wants to live. Every animal has a personality. But that's just how I think about them in general. But pigeons especially, because I'm not sure how many people know this or if this is a common knowledge, but pigeons were formerly domesticated. So most of the pigeons, if not all of them that you see in cities or in suburbs or wherever you might find them, are feral descendants of domesticated ancestors. So we use them for mostly sending messages. I mean, we use them as passenger pigeons, but then the passenger pigeon as a species is extinct now. But the classic pigeons that you see around, they've delivered messages of wins and losses at the Olympics and wins and losses in battle and all these really useful things, sending messages to loved ones. And then obviously we invented other ways to communicate and they fell out of fashion. And now that they're just living on the streets and rumored to be spreading all these diseases, even though that's not necessarily true. And a lot of people call them rats with wings, which I find particularly offensive. So they have a bad reputation now, even though they're just these once loved animals that we have abandoned. And now we hold them responsible for living among us as they have been trained to do. But they also make great pets for people who are prepared for them. So I think pigeons are having a moment. A lot of people are learning about how to appreciate them and hopefully treat them better, because there's so much abuse of pigeons happening everywhere.
Yeah, and pigeons are basically oversized doves.
Right.
They're basically the same species, but doves are prettier, doves are softer and more tolerated. Yeah, and more symbolic. And we have a lot of mourning doves in our area. My only issue with them, Halsey, is they're dumb. They make nests in the worst places possible, and that's on them.
Well, pigeons make terrible nests too, because their natural habitat is like rock faces. So you'll see a lot of videos on the internet or pictures, viral stories about how terrible pigeon nests are. And they just throw a couple objects sparsely curated around an egg. And it's just because the only job of the nest in these rock face dwellings was to keep the egg from rolling over the cliff. So it wasn't, they never have needed to build these sophisticated nests like a barn swallow, for example. They just need to build basically a ledge or a barrier. So they're not bad at their jobs. They just don't know they don't have a place to do their job.
Yeah, so often you'll come across like a pair of mourning doves and you'll startle them because they put a nest just, in the worst place possible. But they need to learn a little bit to move along, but otherwise not really a nuisance for a garden.
Right.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
In the book The Urban Garden by Kathy Jentz and Terry Spate, you'll find dozens of inspiring and creative ways to grow flowers, shrubs, vegetables, herbs, and other plants in small spaces and with a limited budget. Whether you want to grow on a balcony, rooftop, front stoop, or a tiny urban patio, turn your growing dreams into reality and build a gorgeous and unique garden that showcases your personal style while still being functional and productive. With the ingenious ideas and resourceful tactics found here, you'll be maximizing yields and beauty from every square inch of your space. No matter what you grow, the 101 amazing growing ideas found in the urban garden will turn your tiny urban yard into a treasure trove of green you'll be proud to share with family and friends. Buy your copy today at your local retail bookseller or order it online now at Amazon.com or bookshop.org.
Don't chew on that, Max.
Cooper loves that chew too.
Oh, now he's into Cooper's food. Wow, he is loving it. What do you feed Cooper?
Blue Buffalo Life Protection Formula. He never leaves a crumb. I love it because it's made with high-quality protein, nutrient-rich fruits and veggies, and wholesome whole grains.
Looks like we're switching to Blue.
Blue Buffalo foods are made with the superior ingredients your dog needs to thrive. Can your dog food say that? Visit feedbluefood.com to learn more.
Let's move on to some of our bigger pests, bigger as in more stressful for people and gardens, which are the rodent category, especially mice and rats.
Everybody's favorite. Well, mice have lived among us for probably since the dawn of agriculture, and that they've sort of adapted their diet to eat grains that we produce. And that's why they live near us, because that's how they've adapted over the last 10,000 years. Mm-hmm. So they do carry a number of very scary and difficult to pronounce diseases that are a real threat to people. Like in the western half of the United States, the hantavirus is deadly. And then there's leptospirosis and all these other hosts of diseases that their droppings can cause. If you inhale dust from their droppings, it can be a serious issue. But it's another case. I feel like I keep repeating myself, but it's another case where we are creating abundance for animals, and we would do the same thing if we were in their position. Like every single animal is seeking shelter, warmth, and food. So our houses are very convenient for those types of activities for them. So there are ways to humanely get rid of mice. I know another story about my mom. She's also a lot of the inspiration for my animal obsession, and she's always been very kind to animals, but she had sort of a minor infestation of mice and would trap each one in one of those lucite clear humane traps and then drive them away, like get in her car with the mouse and take him on a little ride far away, because they have to be taken very far away or else they'll remember and come right back. Mm-hmm. And so she was doing this for weeks. And there are better ways to do it than that, but I think that the inhumane ways that we've sort of conjured to get rid of mice are not only unnecessary, but they don't help, because they're not going to prevent the issue from happening in the first place. You're just killing them in kind of extraordinarily cruel ways, like the glue trap, etc. So I think instead of viewing them as these like disease-ridden vermin, which is the case with so many of the animals in the book, we should think of them as having the same needs as us. And we don't want to live with mice. That's a medical issue. I get it. But we can also hire somebody to seal the entrances of the home. And yes, they can fit into very tiny ones. So it does require a professional. But having a little bit more empathy for their needs and how they've adapted to live near us might ease the tension a little bit.
And I always recommend, Halsey, like good garden hygiene, meaning you can cut down a lot on the vermin by not having fallen fruit and tomatoes and other produce on the ground. Feeding birds might not be an option for you if you're in an urban area with intense mice or rabbit infestations, because you're basically feeding them too with the bird seed. So you might have to just stop and just do growing wildflowers and let the birds have those seed heads, but the mice and rodents not get supplemental bird seed. And the other thing I do is make sure to have any seed that you collect or store, say in your garden shed, inside either metal or glass, because they'll chew through anything else.
Right. That's another problem they cause is power outages or breaking appliances or things like that. But also poisoning them if you're trying to not harm the environment, poisoning them secondarily poisons other predators in the area. So there's just like no bad reason to be a little bit more humane in general. It helps everybody out.
Yeah, especially we don't want to poison a mouse and then a beloved owl or hawk who could kill several a night be taken out by that poison.
Right. So it's a compounding issue, and then it also might make one think about, why do I favor this beautiful owl over a mouse? They both have the same needs and rights to live. So that's at least what I think.
Well, let's talk about rats. And
this one's a little, I feel like a lawyer for animals. I'm like, well.
Yes. So we've talked in the past on the GardenDC podcast about dealing with rats, especially in vegetable gardening in urban areas. And I'll link that podcast in our show notes. But any positives about rats that you can share?
Okay, I'm lawyering up. Imagine me on the stand. They are very smart. They're very smart. They also somehow, for some people, make great pets. They're also really social, and they can be trained also, obviously, since they're pets. They can be trained, and in some places they're trained to detect tuberculosis. So again, we caused the problem with rats. They're also blamed for the plague, which is not true. They did not do that. That was us. And we just we use words like "you're a rat" to describe somebody that's deceitful or a traitor. And what did they do? They're just living and doing what they need to do to live. So yeah, my case for the rat is that they're very smart and they're very social. Studies show that they would choose saving a rat friend over food. So I don't know. I think that makes them sympathetic characters.
Yeah, and if you grew up on things like the rats of NIMH and other stories
The Secret
like
of
that.
Nim. I love that movie.
Yes. Then you're like, okay.
Yeah.
So rats get a little sympathy there. But yes, not in our
Pizza
gardens.
Rat is a cultural icon.
Yes.
So
those are the good rat qualities.
Yeah.
But hopefully not in your house unless it's your pet and, a pet that you've welcomed in.
Right.
Not so much in your garden, of course.
No.
Kind of adjacent relative, the rabbit, is the bane of a lot of gardeners, going back to, of course, the classic Peter Rabbit.
Yeah.
And the struggles he had with his local gardener. And for a lot of us, it's cute, especially at the baby stage, rabbits, but it's also going back to the Canada geese.
Sure. Which they are very well known for. Lots of euphemistic stuff about them having a lot of babies are used. But I mean, I want to talk about glyphosate. That's what I'm here to talk about. But like bunnies, rabbits, they could do the job of a weed killer. I know they eat a lot of stuff in the garden that we would prefer they don't. And they chew on baby trees and ruin orchard farmers' life. And I get that. I totally get that. Fair. But they also have such a varied diet of plants, and they could totally take care of the weed issue for us in so many ways. And instead of using glyphosate, I think I'm pronouncing that wrong. Is it? Sorry, 1 second. Glyphosate. Yes. Okay, I mix up my syllables sometimes. That chemical can kill so many other animals that we actually do like. And also, it can cause sorry, I'm losing my spot. The EPA in 2020 found that chemical can kill or injure up to 93% of all endangered species. And that's just something that people are able to buy at Home Depot or use in their garden regularly to keep their lawns, which I'm also an anti-lawn person. Sorry to anyone that I have a lawn, but I don't have a choice because I'm currently renting. But And I have this dream of having like a pollinator garden, and I like to leave the leaves and all those things. Hot take, I know. But people just would do anything for their lawns. And I think if we just let nature be nature and let bunnies be bunnies, and yes, mitigate the thievery, I think we could all live peacefully. And let them do the job of mowing. I don't want to mow. I don't want to weed. Let her do it.
If you have a clover lawn, the rabbits love clover. It's great for a sunny lawn spot as a turf replacement, and the rabbits will be happy and you'll be happy.
Great. We have a solution. Case closed.
So next on our list are foxes, who are predators of rabbits. So people usually will encourage foxes to come, but then there sometimes is a disease issue related to foxes.
Right. And they're also kind of similarly mischievous, like how we describe raccoons. And we also have so many expressions related to foxes. Even the word shenanigan comes from a Gaelic word, what I will not attempt to pronounce, that means I play the fox. So I don't know if you remember the Capitol fox from a couple years ago. She was killed by, I think, U.S. Capitol Police on the grounds of the Capitol because she bit somebody. She bit a congressman, and she was just protecting her den. And again, we've manicured anyone who's ever been to Washington, D.C. knows how manicured it is, and everything is pristine, and it looks kind of like somebody has gone out with a ruler on every square inch of the mall and double checked that everything is exactly the same length. It is very beautiful, but very not conducive to animals and their natural habitat. So she had a den there, and she was euthanized. So I don't know. Again, fox in the hen house. There can be a problem for people who have a chicken coop, which I understand. But again, we've reduced their natural habitat by so much, and then also provided a buffet for them in their minds. And I'm not sure about the disease quotient. That wasn't my focus on them on my page about them in the book. But I think in general, I do know that farmers sometimes bring them on the properties to mitigate other animals that could be worse.
Yes.
So there are positives and negatives.
Yeah, and that's why some people encourage foxes or bring them, is because they will get rid of the vermin and the rabbits and other creatures. But also there's the rabies and the mange. That's usually like the trade-off, is as long as they're healthy and disease-free, then you're happy to have them on your property usually.
Right. And don't people mistake some foxes for having mange or some sort of disease when they're out during the day, even though it could just be a mother trying to grab food for the kits?
Yeah, I think like most mammals that are active dawn and dusk hours, it's unusual to see them out during the day, but that doesn't mean they never will be out during the day.
Right.
Yeah. So some people get scared of that. And also with our domestic pets, people are nervous about their cats and small dogs if there's foxes or coyotes or similar other creatures around.
Right.
So let's jump to groundhogs, because, I got a little bone to pick with Punxsutawney Phil.
Ooh, yeah.
This has been a horrible winter. But in general, groundhogs can be a real pest and nuisance for gardeners and farmers alike.
They can. The origin story of the Punxsutawney Phil, though, I think is kind of funny that we've just decided that this animal is a meteorologist. Like, we haven't given jobs to any other animals like that, but okay. It's very funny to me. And I also didn't know that they're called whistle pigs as well because of the sounds they make. But yeah, they dig pretty complex burrows, and that can definitely mess up people's plants and also injure people stepping in them, breaking ankles, all that stuff. Typical of burrowing creatures, but their burrows can provide homes for other animals after they've left, and they aerate the soil as well, just like any other sort of burrowing or digging animals. All in all, they're so cute. Come on. They stand up on their little hind legs and they're munching on your carrots. It's like a tax for the show.
Yeah, and getting back to Punxsutawney Phil, just to drop some pagan lore in there. So there was very old Celtic traditions around Imbolc, which is that period between winter and spring, using like serpents or badgers, other hibernating creatures, pulling them out of hibernation to test when spring's
Mhm.
arrival would be. So it goes back many millennia. The fact that we gave it a name and it came to like along with German settlers in Pennsylvania is, it's funny, but that's the one that makes the headlines now.
Right.
Most of us aren't going around trying to find a badger to pull out of hibernation.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That seems unfair.
No. But yeah, I think a lot of people, groundhogs, of course, can devastate your vegetable garden. Everything you like to eat, they like to eat. So the best thing you can do is exclusion fencing, is to make a fence that is not so taut that they can climb it and get over it. So kind of like a wiggly fence. If you can picture that, a fence with a little bit of give, a wire fence, and also one where the wire is buried into the ground in kind of an L shape so that when they dig, they can't go under the fence. So you want them to prevent them from digging and getting under because they're very good diggers, as you were saying. So let's move on to what is considered the number one pest animal for gardeners in most of our region, and that's deer.
Of course. Poor Bambi. So I know everybody, okay, maybe I'm saying this too much, but I love deer. I think they're so beautiful. I know people that actively feed them. I won't name names because to protect the innocent and all that, but I don't know. They do a lot of zinnias. They eat a lot of ornamental plants. They eat a lot of things that people would rather they not, especially things that are beautiful and somehow probably take the longest to grow. And it feels like a direct insult. I think, and this is just popping into my head now, but my grandmother had this fabulous flower garden, and she was so mad. And all the deer came through and ate all of them in one fell swoop, and she was so upset. So I actually drew a picture of a deer with sort of that old-timey like convict uniform with like a mask and everything, and I had him breaking into her cookie jar, and that made her even more mad. I think I was probably 7. So I've always been on team deer. But a solution to, I mean, a lot of people say that overpopulation is the problem, which if you think about other ecosystems, like we're talking about Yellowstone, there's an overpopulation issue with a lot of ungulates or herbivores, large herbivores that eat a lot of plants because of the lack of predators. And since we don't have any predators that are big enough to take down a deer, their populations do explode. And they will get into your garden and crowd your driveway or all those things. But another problem that's presented with deer is car accidents. And they're responsible for, I think, like over 1 million car accidents a year in the US. And one thing that we can do is make more wildlife overpasses. And that's really good for everybody. It saves a ton of money. I mean, it costs a lot of money to make a wildlife overpass, but it will save us a lot of money in the long run, whether it's due to like medical bills from car accidents or the emergency services that need to be called, all the a new car, all these things, to say nothing of like loss of life, right? So, and the other thing that we could do, while it's also expensive and people don't like it because it's expensive, is sterilization programs. And they are proven to work. Actually, a study at NIH, the Bethesda campus, they did a study there and it reduced the population by quite a bit, I think 50% almost over the course of a couple of years. Rather, because just killing and shooting individuals, I don't know. I'm not a fan of that. I know there's a big debate and I'm not wading into those waters right now, but at least sterilization efforts do work and they do help. They just require a lot of time and money to invest.
Yes. And, if you don't have an island, there's always going to be new deer coming in who aren't sterilized. So
exactly.
There's that issue.
Yeah.
So as we talked about, excluding the animal, like we did with our domestic pets, keeping the deer out of your property as much as possible. They are creatures of habit. So once they learn that there is a good food source in a certain place, they're going to come back. They know, and they teach their does, their fawns, the next generation, just like we talked about with the crows. They know where the good sources are. So they will always come back. And you want to break that habit somehow of saying, nope, this is the line right here. So that we can have our gardens, but also have our natural wildlife too.
Yeah.
So, Halsey, where can our listeners contact you to find out more?
Well, I'm always on Instagram. Instagram is kind of the first place you should go to find out about what I'm doing. You can find me on Instagram at Halsey Berryman. You can also look at my website, which has a more curated version of what I'm up to that I really need to update more, and that's just halseyberryman.com. You can also pre-order my book. Sorry, go ahead. You can.
Oh, no. Go ahead.
Okay. You can pre-order my book, Pests and Other Friends, right now. You can find that on my Instagram or on my website, and that will be coming out March 30th of 2026.
Great. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well, so people can order your book. And there are tons of creatures in your book that we didn't have time to talk about on this podcast. So I'm going to put you on the spot, Halsey, and say, is there a favorite pest/creature in your book that we didn't talk about already?
I mean, we did a lot of the hits, but I think I want to keep some of them a secret. But one that I will say is, I think some of the Southwest pests are really interesting to me, like javelinas. I learned a lot about them in preparation for the book. I think, again, they're so cute and they knock over stuff and they're so funny. And also they're not pigs. And I'll leave the rest to mystery.
So, yeah, javelinas, you'll have to find out in her book.
Breaking news. They exist.
Thank you so much, Halsey.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
Get low-maintenance alternatives to lawns with Ground Cover Revolution by Kathy Jentz. Reducing the lawn is among the biggest trends in homeownership, with an endless stream of homeowners looking for an eco-friendly alternative to a traditional turfgrass lawn. In the last few years alone, over 23 million Americans converted part of their lawn to a natural landscape, and now they're looking to do even more. The biggest challenge to adopting this new ideal of the perfect lawn? Knowing how and when to replace your turf, and which plants are the best ones for the job. Ground Cover Revolution is here with all the answers you need, and some you didn't even know you needed. Included are 40 in-depth profiles of plants that are perfect choices for replacing a grass lawn. There are options for sun, for shade, for dry and wet sites, and for various climates around the globe. There are choices that bloom, options that are evergreen, and selections that are deer-resistant. Kathy Jentz has also included an incredibly useful chart that gives you all the specifics on each of the 40 choices for quick reference and to make your ground cover selection process even easier. Whether you want to replace the entire lawn or just reduce the amount of land dedicated to turf, Ground Cover Revolution will help you usher in a new and improved idea of what a beautiful lawn should be. Ground Cover Revolution is available now wherever you buy books, including Amazon.com and Bookshop.org.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Wallflower, plant profile. Wallflowers, Ericium species, are cool season annuals, perennials, or biennials, depending on where they're growing. They have low mounding foliage and flower from late spring to early summer. The blooms are fragrant and are a dense, colorful cluster of 4-petaled flowers in shades of yellow, orange, red, pink, or purple. Wallflowers are in the Brassica family with 150 different species. The garden varieties are native to southern Europe and the Mediterranean. Several species are native to the United States, including the western wildflower, sand dune wallflower, and shy wallflower. They are generally found in rocky areas, cliffs, and slopes. They are hardy to USDA zones 5 to 11. Wallflowers do best in full sun and thrive in well-drained sandy or rocky soils. They are drought-tolerant once established and should not be overwatered. Wallflowers are deer and rabbit resistant due to their strong scent and sometimes bitter taste. They are low maintenance. Trim back flower stems after blooming to encourage further blooming or to prevent self-seeding. Avoid too much fertilizer as wallflowers are not heavy feeders and too much fertilizer can lead to leggy growth. Wallflowers are excellent for pollinator gardens, attracting hummingbirds, bees, butterflies, and moths. They are ideal for covering rocky, sunny, or poor soil areas that other plants can't tolerate. They are often used in containers, rock gardens, along paths, and in raised beds. Propagate wallflowers by taking semi-ripe cuttings in early summer. They can also be grown from seed sown in summer for flowers the following spring. Wallflowers, you can grow that. What's new in the garden this week? Well, I'm finally seeing my first crocus pop up amongst my garden gnomes and a few patches in the back of my garden as well. In gardening tips that we shared on our social media this week, we talked about invasive species week, and we recommended to use a weed wrench to pull small Norway maple saplings out of the ground with most of their roots intact. In local gardening events that you might want to attend, the Capital Area Food Bank is putting on a garden workshop series with new and expanded classes running from March through November, and these are free monthly classes. You can sign up for them through the Capital Area Food Bank. They take place in the Urban Demonstration Garden in Northeast Washington, D.C., near the Fort Totten Metro. I will be teaching one of those courses, and that will be on May 27th. All about growing great tomatoes in our area, and all attendees will be able to take home a tomato seedling as well, as long as supplies last. You can find out more about that again at capitalareafoodbank.org. And then a reminder that we will be speaking and exhibiting at Rooting DC on Saturday, March 7th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Eastern High School in Washington, D.C. You can register for that for free at eventbrite.com. And coming up on Saturday, March 18th at Green Spring Gardens is a garden talk on easy houseplants to grow. This is 10:30 a.m. in person at Green Spring Gardens in Alexandria, Virginia. They'll talk about livening up your space to make it beautiful with indoor plants and discovering easy care, low light varieties and tips to keep them thriving. Extension Master Gardeners will be hosting this talk. The registration fee is $12 per person, and you can register online for that at fairfaxcounty.gov/.
This is Christy Page with Food Gardening Network with Growing Kale in Pots for Fresh Greens All Year Long by Bill Dugan. Kale may be the perfect vegetable. It's healthy, delicious, easy to grow, versatile in the kitchen, and it can be quite a beautiful addition to your garden. Accordingly, growing kale in pots is as easy as can be. There's some good reasons for growing kale in pots too. Space is one consideration. If you don't have the room for a traditional garden or raised bed garden, you can still grow a lot of produce in containers. Another reason for growing kale in containers is the fact that kale is a cool weather crop. That means you may have to start growing your kale in pots in a cool spot in your home if you want to enjoy your own fresh red Russian or blue Scotch curled kale in the middle of summer. This also means even when it gets too cold outdoors for kale, you can still enjoy this most wonderful of vegetables. 7 things you should know about growing kale in pots. Well, it's easy enough, but there are a few tips that'll help make your endeavors more successful and delicious. 1. Be aware of your container material. When growing kale in pots, or any plant for that matter, the material of your container makes a difference in things like how much water your plant will need or how difficult it will be to move. Plastic containers, for example, are lighter and easier to move, but they also retain water. You may consider that a positive or a negative. Terracotta, on the other hand, is porous and allows for more evaporation, but it's also a lot heavier. Number 2, give them some space. When those tiny little seedlings look even smaller in a large pot, it's a challenge to avoid overplanting. But those little kale seedlings will grow and crowd each other out. Some varieties, like Black Magic Kale, can grow to 3 feet tall and 2 feet wide. 3. Use an appropriately sized pot. Speaking of space and size, it's important to select the right kind of pot for the kale you want to grow. Obviously, a larger variety of kale needs a larger pot. Generally speaking, though, a 3 to 5 gallon pot is a good starting point. And always make sure your pot has plenty of drainage. We don't want root rot. Number 4, kale loves sunlight. Even though it's a cool weather plant, kale still likes to get a lot of sunshine. Whether indoors or out, place your kale in a spot where it can get 6 to 8 hours of direct sunshine. Give your kale some time outside. Like most plants, kale enjoys the fresh air and sunshine of the great outdoors. As long as it's not too hot or cold, take your potted kale outdoors for the day. Better yet, leave them out overnight if you can. Water, water, water is number 6. Consistent watering is key. Certainly don't overdo it, but kale does like moisture. And when you're growing kale in pots, it's important to remember that the soil can dry out quickly, especially on warm days. 7. Fertilize it. Since kale is a heavy feeder, it's a good idea to give your kale plants a little side dressing of fertilizer about once every 4 weeks. Choose a vegetable fertilizer that's high in nitrogen. Now, choose your kale. This may be the hardest part of growing kale in pots, is choosing which variety you want to grow. There are 4 basic types of kale: flat leaf, curly leaf, broadleaf, and Lasanto, or dinosaur kale. Then you have multiple varieties, like dwarf Siberian, which can grow to about 16 inches tall, to the enormous 1,000-head kale, which can be 5 feet tall and 6 feet wide. There are ornamental varieties, which are technically edible, but may be tough, chewy, or bitter. And one variety that's popular among home gardeners is dazzling blue kale. This is a sturdy plant whose flavor improves when the temperatures drop. The leaves are delicious in salads and smoothies, too. Well, that's been it for On the Last Word with Kale with Christy Page at foodgardening.com.
Thank you for listening to GardenDC. This episode was made by real humans. It was produced and hosted by myself, Kathy Jentz. The Let the Sunshine music interludes are by James Mulvaney. If you like this episode, you may also enjoy listening to GardenDC Podcast Episode 198, Rats and Other Destructive Critters, Episode 174, Wildscaping, Episode 50, Deer-Resistant Native Plants. You can become a listener supporter by going to the link in our show notes. Another way to support this podcast is to subscribe to our monthly digital publication, Washington Gardener Magazine. To do so, go to WashingtonGardener.com or WashingtonGardener.blogspot.com. You can find Washington Gardener on Twitter or X, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Pinterest at WDC Gardener, and on Facebook at Washington Gardener Magazine. And be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast listening app. Please take a moment to share us on social media with hashtag GardenDC and with your gardening friends so other gardeners can find us too. My personal favorite gardening pest is the star-nosed mole. Like a lot of other creatures mentioned in this episode, it can do some garden damage, but its benefits outweigh its deficits. For instance, moles aerate the soil and eat insect larvae. They are also solitary nighttime dwellers that make good food for foxes, owls, and other beneficial predators. Happy gardening!